What's up, everybody? It's Make It Make Sense. I'm here once again with Dimitri, the New York attorney, Dimitri. How's it going, Dimitri?
It's going well. Thanks so much for having me.
This Diddy story has kind of taken over the news cycle.
You know, it's funny because I did a whole bunch of press back in November when the civil lawsuit was filed, right? And I was very careful, as I still am really, to distinguish between a civil case and a criminal case, right? And while those allegations in the initial lawsuit sounded criminal, I wanted to make sure that folks know it's not a criminal case, right? There's no jail time, things like that. Now, it's still not a criminal case. In other words, there's no charges that were filed. There's no indictment, none of that kind of thing. But we're getting closer to making that assumption a little easier, right? Because when the federal government executes a warrant, that's not necessarily something to scoff at, because getting into the home, right? If you back up, right, broadly speaking, the Fourth Amendment doesn't allow a search unless there's a warrant and probable cause, right? And then over time, we've kind of done away with those rules, and now we have things like stop and frisk and plain view and other things. But you still can't get into the home, really, unless you have a warrant, which means that one of these agents must have went to a judge and testified under oath that there's cause to believe something's going on. And then the judge issued a warrant. And the feds, and DHS is obviously a federal agency, the feds do a really good job of investigating cases, right? They allocate enormous resources to cases. They do a good job with lawyers, investigators, and all the branches of the federal government, like DHS and FBI and other places, do a really good job of gathering and collecting evidence and building cases. That's why their conviction rates are so high. And this is certainly not a good thing. Again, we can't jump to a conclusion and say that he's going to jail or he's going to be arrested or, but the execution of a search warrant at one's home, searches and seizures of properties, doesn't bode well.
He's already been tried in the court of public opinion. And they say he's going to jail.
Well, that's not, yeah. But people like me have to be careful to make that distinction because that's a big deal. That's really important, right? He has not been charged. He's presumed innocent. Even once he's charged, he's presumed innocent, all the way up until the very, very end, if there is a very end. And I'm assuming maybe he didn't know this was coming in this way at this time, but I'm sure that he was given advice by his lawyers that something like this may happen, right? He's a sophisticated guy. He has sophisticated lawyers, probably in most states in the country, who told him, hey, this may happen. And I can't imagine this was terribly shocking to him based on what we're seeing now.
Let's go ahead and do the intro really quick. Guys, like the video as the intro plays, and we're going to be right back with Dimitri. Oh, now I'm embarrassed about my intro.
I was listening to Make It Make Sense. Shout out to Make It Make Sense. Thank you.
Make it make sense to me intellectually.
Make it make sense.
Make it make sense.
Big moves.
Surfer.
Make it make sense. Tell me how you squeeze it. Make it make sense. Tell me about the things that you say. Make it make sense. Tell me about the things of your dream. Hey, let me work out all the things in between. Make it make sense. Tell me how you squeeze it. Make it make sense. Tell me about the things that you say. Make it make sense. Tell me about the things of your dream. Hey, let me work out all the things in between. Make it make sense.
No, this is the party.
Oh, all right, I just come back when everybody get here.
Nah, stay.
Nah, it's cool. I just come back later when everybody
I
get
said stay!
Oh, Diddy, all right, I'm here.
Party with me, Daddy.
I'll be the first one here, okay. Where everybody at?
It's just me and you in here today. Yeah. Now come dance for Brother Love.
I mean, ain't no music playing right now.
I said dance for Brother Love! Take that.
Okay. So I did hear that he was tipped off. I have a couple questions regarding that because I was told that oftentimes the feds will reach out to a person's attorneys and say, hey, this is coming. But nobody has been able to tell me when he was tipped off, because as we now know, he was on a flight headed God knows where, but his children were still at the house.
So look,
Mhm.
so, his lawyers likely advised him that something like this may happen. That doesn't mean they were tipped off directly as to a specific time and place and scope, right? But judging by what's been happening in this case, and I've been involved in cases like this, right? You kind of have a sense that something like this may happen. And I'm sure, being a guy like him who knows the system, he's been tried in New York before, right? He's been through the criminal process. He was acquitted by a jury in the late 90s. So this isn't new. And so I can't imagine, judging by the allegations and judging by the scope of stuff coming down the pike, he didn't at least have a sense that this may happen, right? I don't think it was a complete and utter shock.
The allegations are that in his phones and computers, there are images and videos of people in very compromising positions. If he were in any way tipped off, would there be a way for him to destroy the evidence?
So if you destroy evidence in anticipation of the government seizing it, then that's a big problem, right? They can charge you with crimes as it relates to that. I'll also say, by the way, that it's very, very hard to get rid of electronic evidence, right? You and I may think that we know how to do it. I promise the government can get a whole lot that we think they can't get. So, look, I don't.
It's in the cloud.
Well,
Yeah.
look, the cloud. I wish I was smart enough to know the details of these things. But I do know that a lot is recoverable. So, I can't imagine he's throwing computers off of windows, right? A lot is recoverable. But I we can't really jump to a conclusion and say that he destroyed evidence and so on and so forth.
Have you seen, because you said you've dealt with cases similar to this, or
Yeah.
have you seen situations where people destroyed evidence, and how was it retrieved?
So again, it's tough to say how the government technically goes about doing it, because they have experts, and then defense lawyers can hire experts, right? It becomes that kind of battle. But generally speaking, it's very hard to get rid of evidence. And obviously, as a lawyer, you always tell your clients, don't get rid of evidence for a variety of reasons. And so I can't recall if I've ever been in a situation quite like this one. But the spoliation of evidence, the destruction of evidence, those are big deals. And I'm pretty sure he's been told to avoid doing that kind of thing if he doesn't know that he shouldn't himself, which I'm sure he does.
Okay. If something is found, because guys, we have to work in hypotheticals here. Nobody knows anything. We do have the actual complaints, but Diddy's not been charged with anything as of yet. If something was found with someone that was very high profile, does that information get out to the public, or will it be sealed at that point?
It depends. So before he's charged, before he's in court, if he's in court, nothing is turned over, right? The government has no obligation to turn anything over. If and when he's in court, the discovery protocols kick in, right? The government has to turn over their evidence. Now, if there are certain pieces of information that are sensitive and must be kept confidential, then the system will typically do that to a degree, right? Don't forget, defendants have constitutional rights, right, under the Sixth Amendment, to be confronted by the witnesses against them, right? They have to know who the witnesses are. And, this often happens in mob cases, right, where there are confidential informants and the government needs to keep them under wraps. And so this kind of fight happens all the time. If there is such a thing here, that will be, I presume, kept under wraps for some time. If there's other sensitive information relating to children and other things, that may also be kept under wraps to a degree. But if he's going to go to trial, if there's a case, which there may not be, but if there's a case and if he goes to trial, he'll need the evidence against him, obviously.
Wow. Just based on what you have seen within the last day, if you had I don't want to say if you were Diddy's attorney, if you had a client who was going through what Diddy is going through today, what would you be advising them?
Yeah, I've had clients in this case, and in this kind of case, and you tell them what you tell everybody who's confronted with a search warrant situation, right? Make sure you know everybody who's in your house. Get a name of all the agents. Get a name of everything they're taking, right? Make sure you get a copy of the warrant. Don't say anything. Keep your mouth shut, because anything you say can be held against you later on. And so that's what I'm assuming he did. That's what I'm assuming his lawyers told him to do.
I went through the amended complaint by Little Rod, I'm sorry. And it feels like Tyrone is kind of like piecemealing the evidence. We're getting like small glimpses. And the new complaint is like maybe 20 pages longer than the initial complaint. Is that customary, or do you kind of just throw everything out on the first complaint?
Well, the whole point of an amended complaint is that something changed, right? So you have to amend your complaint. So that's why that happened here. But I will say that civil complaint isn't necessarily what's serving as the basis for this, right? Again, it's easy to draw that connection. I understand that, right? And it's possible that the feds may have used some of this stuff, right, to investigate. But we have to be careful to not draw that connection, because that may not be the case. If and when there are charges brought, if and when there's an indictment that is returned, it may reflect something entirely different.
What was interesting to me was he got raided on the 25th. The amended complaint came out on the 25th. And in that complaint, there are a lot more examples of sex trafficking. And he's now showing exhibits where he's stating, I was forced to hire this sex worker on this date. She came back, or he came back. The sex worker came back this many times. I was forced to pay for their Ubers. So those are the things that have been added. So that led me to believe that, well, let me say this as well. It's been reported that there are 3 women and 1 man, and 1 man who has been working with the feds. So I know you said we should not be drawing that complaint. I mean, we should not be drawing that conclusion. But his complaint did come out, and there are numerous instances of sex traffic listed on the amended complaint that were not there. That was not there in the old one.
Well, if there's a warrant, right? So if there's a warrant in a case, then the government, like I said, had to go under oath and attest to what is being searched and why it's needed, right? What the crime is. Again, it's a safe presumption to think that before a government agent does that, he has to collect certain information. And it's safe to assume that he spoke to certain witnesses. Now, that may not be the case. We don't know. But in the case of this scope, in a case that will get this much attention, I's will be dotted and T's will be crossed.
Do you expect Homeland Security to come out with an actual statement soon?
I don't. I think that if and when something happens, it'll be in the form of a criminal case. I can't imagine they'll make statements, because they typically don't make statements in ongoing investigations.
They gave the news media outlets like very little, and it was extremely vague.
Yeah, because don't forget, right? They're in these days, especially, you got to be careful not to be open enough where you open yourself up to getting rather bad advice, tips that aren't substantiated, right? There may be a whole lot of people that come out of this that are looking for their 15 minutes or whatever, right? And the government has a job to do, and that's to protect the public. And so there's a reason why they don't comment on these kind of investigations.
Okay. I feel as though, like, speaking to so many people, the general consensus was people were upset at all of these civil cases. And everybody was like, well, when is Diddy going to be investigated? And I feel like the average person is not thinking that this has been in the works for a minute. And I feel like they think that the turnaround time for this, like, they raided his house, he'll be in jail next week. He wasn't even handcuffed when they detained him at the airport.
Yeah, right. You're exactly right. So this investigation may have been going on for years, right? We don't know. Nobody knows. These are all internal things that may come out if we get further into any court proceeding, right? That's the only time we'll really know what happened and when. The fact that this happened doesn't necessarily mean he'll be charged right away or at all. And even if he is charged, that presumption of innocence still exists, right? So we have to be careful. But it may take time. This is an investigation where the government knows this is a guy with high-powered lawyers, high-powered investigators. They're going to do their work. And sometimes that takes time. And sometimes you have to time things in a certain way where your investigation isn't obstructed by the media and by other parties coming out of the woodwork, right? So it's a very delicate kind of game they have to play.
It's interesting that you should say that. Tyrone Blackburn, Little Rod's attorney, made some claims in a statement to, I believe, the judge. Let me pull that up really quickly. And you can tell me what you think or how you perceive these. Let's see. It says, although they have been in constant contact with the writer through threatening emails and letters, the remaining defendants have yet to appear in the case. Instead, defendant Sean Combs, through his representatives, has engaged in concerning behavior, including manufacturing stories about plaintiff on TMZ and dispatching his agents to harass plaintiff's 8-year-old daughter, the mother of his child, and ex-spouses, all of whom have expressed fear of potential harm by defendant Combs. Moreover, defendant Combs has attempted to contact plaintiff through third parties to persuade plaintiff to terminate the writer and hire counsel who has a relationship with defendant Combs. These actions have compelled the plaintiff and his loved ones to file a police report. This writer has raised concerns surrounding this harassing behavior, and they doubled down and indicated that their harassing behavior will continue. Consequently, the plaintiff has reported these actions to the California, New York, and New Jersey state bars. Any thoughts on that?
So these are allegations, right? All a lawyer needs for something like this is to have a client come to him in good faith. And I'm sure this lawyer did that. And I'm sure this lawyer is doing this completely ethically and not violating any rules. But it's also, we have to wait and see until we get further into the case to really know what is happening here. Again, we can't go one way or the other.
Right. I mean, again, Diddy has maintained his innocence throughout.
Right.
It's important to say that.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that you kind of taken away that I think that is there anything else that you see happening in the public space that you feel like needs to get corrected with the thought of what this is?
This initially, as far as I recall, I could be wrong. The initial lawsuit was filed in November, I believe. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're in March, almost the end of March. So what I said then is what I'll say now. These things take time. And people back then were clamoring for something. Then it kind of died down a bit. Right. And so criminal investigations of this nature, right, they take a very, very long time. And so we have to be careful not to plug holes and fill gaps that aren't there. But what we can assume now is that the execution of a search warrant, the raiding of a home, the search and seizure of property is not something that he should be happy about.
Okay. And Dimitri actually has his own YouTube channel. So I want to show you guys. You can find it at D Shack Law. Let me pull it up on the screen for you. And Dimitri has agreed to come and give us some insight because us internet detectives, internet attorneys, the court of public opinion, we're all going to have an idea of how we feel about this, but it's important to also know that there are actual aspects of the law that we should be aware of as well. So again, you can find him on YouTube at D Shack Law. And what type of attorney are you again, Dimitri?
I do primarily criminal defense. I do some civil work as well, family law and business disputes, things of that nature. All the messy stuff,
And what do you do on your YouTube channel?
On my YouTube channel, I started it for my students some time ago during COVID when I was teaching at a college here in New York and things went remote. And so I had to keep my students engaged. And so one of the ways I did it was this way. And the channel has kind of taken off and I record interviews with folks. And it's not something I make money from or anything, but it's educational, and if folks want to take a look, they can. There may be some good stuff in there. And reach out to me if you have any questions. Email. I'm always available to answer anything and help in any way that I can.
Okay. So hopefully we can get Dimitri back. If you guys have specific questions for Dimitri, put them in the comment section of this video, and hopefully we can get Dimitri back to answer some of those questions and maybe go live at some point if he's available. He's very busy, you guys. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dimitri. I appreciate this, and we'll be talking soon.
Thanks so much. Take care. Bye-bye.